welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. As always, I'm super thrilled and grateful to have you here with me today, whether you've been listening since the beginning or somewhere in the middle, or you're just joining us for the first time today. I'm grateful for you. And today I'm also super grateful because I am joined by my good friends and my colleagues, Amy Lang of Birds and Bees and Kids, and Casey O'Rourke of Joyful Courage and Sproutable. And we are talking about something that we all find personally and professionally pretty disturbing. So I will note at this point that if you have young kiddos around, this conversation will be explicit both in the language that's used and also descriptions of behavior. And so while I think it's super important for you as a parent or an educator to hear, this is one that I would wait to listen to when your children are not with you. So consider yourselves warned. With that note, I will start by having Amy and Casey introduce themselves. You may remember them from a previous episode or two on the podcast, but if you haven't met them before, I'll let them introduce themselves. Amy, take it away.
Thank you. I am super excited and not excited to talk about this. So I'm Amy Lang. My podcast is called Just Say This, and I am a sexuality and parent educator. And I focus primarily on parents of kids who are 5 to 12 and just help them figure out how to have conversations about sexuality, relationships, consent, all those good things so their kids are prepared for this part of life. And also so you are prepared for this part of life.
Yes. And Casey.
So I am Casey O'Rourke. I'm the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. I'm a positive discipline lead trainer and the adolescent lead at Sproutable. My people are parents moving through the season of adolescence. And I really think about what I do as supporting parents in being with what will show up. And recognizing that the messiness isn't always an indicator that you're doing something wrong. And I was kind of cracking up, Christy, when you were saying, you may remember us from other shows. We just like to swing in and talk about the real fun things like porn and sugar dating and today's topic. So thanks for having us, Christy.
Yeah.
And thanks to everybody for listening.
Yeah, you're totally right, Casey. We do love to bring all the fun topics to the podcast. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm a certified parent coach, a positive discipline educator, and because I have a background in the law and spent many years prosecuting sexually violent predators and other offenders, I am also now a child sexual abuse prevention and consent expert and do a lot of work in this space, which this is kind of what brings us all together is the sex, the safety, the adolescence, and just, moving through those developmental phases and, of course, parenting. So
and our collective ew.
And a collective ew.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're all
ooed.
Yes. Yes. So this conversation was prompted because, Amy, I think you reached out to Casey and me because on February 22nd, the New York Times published an article that is, and we'll link to it in the show notes, but it's all about like kid influencers and more importantly, the parents, or I should say moms, who are managing those accounts. So the article is called A Marketplace of Girl Influencers Managed by Moms and Stalked by Men. And it is icky. It's icky.
Yeah, I saw that and I read it and it is terrible. It is terrible and terrifying And the influencers, you can't air quoting that. I don't even know how to describe that. They're on Instagram and TikTok, and it is just so awful. And that's why I sent the link, because the three of us are in this space around safety and health and all of that. And, I hate to put the word sexuality on this, but it is in that realm in the worst way possible. In the
Yeah.
worst way possible.
Yeah.
So explain it.
Oh, you want me to explain it?
Somebody explain it.
Okay. So I was telling Casey and Amy before we hit record today that I read the article, and then I made a mistake that I will probably regret for years to come, because I went down not a real deep rabbit hole, but I was like, I at least want to sort of see and really see what we're talking about here, because and I think this was really appropriate by the reporters at the New York Times. But in the New York Times articles, they do not share any of the photographs that we're talking about. They describe them, but out of respect for these children, and I think that's such an important word to keep in mind here, that out of respect for the privacy and dignity of these children, they do not share the photos. Meta, however, the company that owns Instagram, does not hesitate to have these photos on its platform. And so this article was all about these children, I mean, ranging from ages, I'll say 4 or 5 to roughly age 12, because you have to be 13 to have your own Instagram account. And so it's before age 13 that these accounts are popping up, and that the mothers of these children are managing these accounts, and they're posting, frankly, really provocative photos, sexually provocative, explicit. I mean, we're not seeing actual private parts revealed, but about as explicit as you can get, and some of them without removal of all clothing. And then they are garnering likes and comments from men, many of whom are known and proven sex offenders. And then some of these moms are offering quote unquote bonus content, which includes additional photo packages, conversations with these children, and even auctioning off or selling off their clothing that they've worn to these men as a way of making money. So that was the gist of the article.
And
oh my God, that's so gross.
It's so gross. And then, just the other thing is that these girls are gymnasts and cheerleaders and dancers, and so they are in leotards and little outfits and that kind of thing. And so Casey, I think that we, all agree that this is they're portrayed as sort of adolescents or teenagers in the way that they look. And the women, these moms, have a business. And if you don't know what an influencer is, Casey, what would you explain what an influencer is, what that means?
Well, funny enough, my husband recently was like, "Are you an influencer? Because you influence people." I was like, "Well, I'm no Kim Kardashian." Okay. An influencer is basically somebody with a following who, is able to generate enough eyeballs on them to be able to say "Oh, and check out this makeup brand or check out this clothing brand," and make some money by name dropping some products and doing paid partnerships. I mean, and that's the basics, right, of that. And yeah, I mean, when I think about this article and this industry and technology in general, I just am so disappointed in the grown-ups. The adults have screwed kids, right? Because even, first of all, the hilarity of you can't be on Instagram until you're 13. Okay. It's a matter of plugging in the numbers, right? There's no follow through or follow up. And then when you start looking, if you have a middle or high school kid, or, And you should be following them on social media. Hopefully they're not on social media as middle schoolers, but they are. And you start paying attention to their friends, like especially the girls. They post pictures and all the comments from their friends, hot flames, like, you're so pretty, over and over, OMG, stunning. I mean, it's just this container that is so hyper focused on not only on how our kids look, but on really looking a certain way, because it is pouty lips and like twists of the body that accentuate the booty. And so then to see that there is, our parents that are literally starting kids off in that mindset, we're just like, stop. It's just screwing with this entire generation. Not only the girls that are being pimped out, but also, and the other eyeballs, like whether it be moms who are like, wow, that looks like a really easy way to create a college fund, or other young girls who are like, look at all the attention they're getting. I could do that too. Like, it's just a normalization of something that is not normal.
Yeah.
And yeah. And then to get to become 16, 17, 18, and bleed into our conversation that we had a few months ago around the idea that, oh, somebody's going to pay me to just show up and be eye candy. And the whole sugar dating thing, I think, is a direct result of this mentality that has been created through, technology and social media. So,
Oh, God,
It's so awful.
Yeah, it's gross.
It's so gross. And what really struck me is that, like, the overwhelming majority of these moms, well, so there's two pieces, I guess I should say, because there's like the mom piece of this, and then there's the corporate piece of this, right? The meta piece. Because what it said in the article is that a lot of the moms know full well that they are pandering to pedophiles, right? They're well aware of it.
100%. 100%. They know.
They know.
And so what's the thought? Like, let's sit with that for a minute. So is it like, well, what? Like, well, I know there's creepy dudes out there checking out my 5-year-old in this leotard, but look at the check we're getting.
Yeah. And not just checking out the 5-year-old, masturbating to the 5-year-old. I'm going to be really like,
yeah,
we know that that's what happens. I know that that's what happens, having done the work that I used to do. So, like, what makes a mom say the check makes it worth knowing that my child's photo is on the internet forever and that pedophiles are masturbating to it?
And it's child sexual abuse material, even though they have that. Isn't there one of the photos they refer to is a, I don't know, 9-10-year-old in a gold lame bikini or something like that? And I think that the moms are hooked into the attention, and they may be doing that thing that sometimes I do, is like, I make the thing, I sell it. It's not my bothersome what the person does with it. Like, and they claim to monitor, right? To like try to get that stuff off of there, but they don't. And I personally think this is like child porn, which is child sexual abuse material. I think those women should be they should be shut down. They should be prosecuted. Like, there should be big consequence for this. And it is, like, the three of us, it's unimaginable that we would do that to our children. It's like exploitation. I mean, don't get me started. Like, it pisses me off that people use their little kids to get attention, right? Like, they're making money. There's some little gal, I can't remember her name, who's super popular. She shows up in my thread, and she's cute and she says funny things, but those parents are making money. I mean, is this like, what was that? Like, is this the equivalent? Anyway, the whole thing is a shit show.
Well, so that actually raises a question. And I'll first add that, like, there were some comments in this to sort of go to that corporate piece where some of the moms were like, the first thing I do when I wake up and the last thing I do before I go to bed is try to block accounts. But Meta, if you block too many accounts, prohibits you from blocking. And so this woman goes, so I guess I've reached my maximum. I can only block 2 pedophiles a day, right? Because Meta shut her down from blocking because she had blocked too many. And she's like, so what am I supposed to do? And of course, my response was take the fucking account off Instagram.
Yeah.
But notwithstanding, the question that did come up as I was reading this is, what's the line, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is the line? Because, if I don't, but if I had a child who was into gymnastics, like I could see posting a picture of her at a gymnastics meet, right? We watch gymnasts on, in the Olympics wearing these outfits. Now, obviously they're not posing super provocatively, but what's the line? Is it an age line? Is it a clothing? Like where, if we're going to say this is child sexual abuse material, and I don't disagree with you, what's the line?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question because I don't know. I mean, because there are parents who are like, oh, look at my kid. They're a pole vaulter. See what they can do. And then, there's a lot of activities that our kids get involved in that are really expensive, right? And here's this kind of normalized at this point way of generating an income to continue to support our kids and the things that they love. And yeah, and how do we police hypothetically, how do we police what is considered okay and what's not considered okay? Because I have a couple kids that I follow because they're freaking hilarious. One girl that was just comedic, and it says account run by mom, and there's no like weirdness, right? As far as like, look at me, I'm so sexy by any means. And is that okay? Right? Is it ever okay for us to be putting our kids out there? And even my kids were like, Rowan said, geez, mom, I Googled myself and it turns out my entire mental health journey is available for everyone on the internet. And I was like, well, you gave me permission. Like, do you want me to take all those? Like, I can get rid of those podcasts. It doesn't have to, I can see what I can do on the back end. We had long conversations about what she was willing to share. And she said, no, it's fine. I was just kind of shocked, and so I get to sit with how that feels for me, which is a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Because then there's also the question of is consent meaningful?
Right. That it's consent. Can a 10-year-old say, does the parent say, hey, are you okay with me posting a picture of you in a gold lame bikini? And then understanding that the comments are going to be from pedophiles, and then explaining what that is, right? Are the moms saying, oh, honey, sorry, you got 73 thumbs up. And 47 of those guys were doing the sploosh.
Ew.
Oh, yeah, it's fucking awful, right?
Yeah.
So it's consent, and there is a line. You do not exploit your child in such a way that there are people commenting like that.
Yeah.
So, but most people, they post the cute picture of their kid doing their thing, and most people are following them, it's not sexualized, right? It's this fun thing like, look at my kid's super fab at this thing. It's not sexualized. So these pictures are sexualized on purpose.
Yeah.
The parents are making money off of them to support whatever. And
also they're public. Like if I were to post a picture of my kids, it goes to my friend. And I know everything on the internet can be shared, but like,
sure.
Right. But but I do try to limit.
Yeah.
And actually I don't post much anymore at all, but.
And your comedian, that's different. She's probably consenting to have that done. She a teenager?
She's like 10. She's a riot.
So that feels different, right? And the child should have the right to say, stop it. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being like from 6 until 12, your parent exploited you, literally exploited you. And then at 13, 14, you're like, oh my God, I searched my own thing. What the hell?
Yeah.
Like,
But
kids aren't
But
stupid.
here's the challenge with that is when and this is why I say, like, is consent meaningful? Because when a child, let's say a 10-year-old, has been taught from the age of 5 that their value is in how they look and how they can make money for their parents and how many likes and comments they can get,
Yeah.
then is that 10-year-old or that 15-year-old likely to wake up and say, "What the fuck, mom?" And in fact, there was one mom in the article that was commenting and saying, I think her daughter's now 17. And she said, I had no idea. I regret this 100%. And part of what I regret is now my daughter believes that her only way forward in life is to be on OnlyFans, right?
Yep.
Which that probably warrants a whole nother episode, ladies. But which I know we talked about a little bit previously, but when we talked about sugar dating, but like it's if that is what they've been taught is their value, then at what point is it likely for them to wake up and say, this is not okay? This is not okay. And
And
so, Casey, I'd love to ask you this question because, you and I both do parent coaching and we talk about that frequently. And as positive discipline advocates and followers and promoters, and Amy, you are as well.
yeah, we all are.
Yeah, we all are. But you and I talk a lot about the importance of starting from connection and relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, what does this do to that like fundamental critical relationship between a mother and her daughter?
Well, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the audience right now listening to us. And my guess is that the people in the audience aren't pimping their kids
Yeah.
online. And so I'm thinking about the opportunity to have countering conversations about our value, about presentation and expression, and really dropping into a lot of curiosity that can sound like, oh my gosh, I read the craziest article, right? And opening up those conversations. And I think that's where we get to nurture the critical thinking muscle in our kids, right? And help them recognize if they're already on social media. Because I would do that with my kids. Like, it is fascinating that, I love talking about how'd you pick that one? Like, why that picture, right? And then asking, like, is it always like this when you post something? Like, I'm noticing the comments and how does it feel? And that's so interesting. And just staying really non-judgmental, but also giving them an opportunity to lift up and out of the experience so that they can look at it and say, like, oh yeah, it is like, here's the comments I get when I post a picture versus, a 15, 16-year-old. So I think that, I think that's really it's a powerful opportunity. And then when I think about the relationship of the mom child in these particular situations, I mean, I think that at some point that child will grow and need to go to therapy and realize, oh, you fucked me. Like, this isn't my fault. My issues are not my fault. My issues stem from being exploited by the person that I trusted and loved the most. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So as far as, that relationship goes, and I try to, when I work with people, one of my questions is like, what do you want things to look like when your kids aren't in your house anymore? Right. And like, this is a road to resentment and anger and disconnection and a lot of therapy for these kids. A lot of trauma to unpack, right? Especially once they kind of realize, it probably will take a minute before they kind of are able to see and realize, oh, I was exploited.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't think those girls know, because the moms say, "Oh my gosh, you look so pretty here. We're going to get that on your feed. How exciting. Hey, I'm going to sell your used leotard for $300 to this
Creepo.
fucker," right? This creepster.
How weird to be 8 years old and be like, somebody wants to buy my leotard for 8.
They don't
Like, what
tell.
is?
They don't tell that.
Oh,
They
okay.
don't tell. They don't tell. They don't tell them they're doing, hey, for $19, you can get on our super special feed. They don't tell their girls that. And if they do, they don't say, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. They say, hey, $300 today. Woot, woot. You're amazing. Like, they don't do the other piece of it, right?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, are they going to come to consciousness? Right?
Yeah, that was a big question that I had. One of the accounts that I looked at when I, as I said, went down this rabbit hole that I will probably forever live to regret.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing the work.
Yeah.
Hard work.
Totally. Totally.
I really, as I was doing it, I was like, oh God, I don't want to see this. But as I was doing it, there was one young girl who I'm going to guess was about 11, best guess, who is an aspiring actress. And there were lots of photos. Okay, so I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but I think it was it Basic Instinct with Sharon Stone, right? Where she's being interviewed. And of course, there's the whole leg crossing thing. And then she opens her legs and then crosses it again. Okay, so this was like a pose with this little girl with her leg crossed, but like you could almost see right up, to the private areas of her body, sitting on a couch with what almost looked to be Botoxed lips and sort of pouty. And they may not have been, they may have been totally natural, and makeup on that an adult woman would wear. And wearing this little dress kind of outfit that almost had a like business dress appearance to it, but a sexy business dress. And that particular photo had 4,600 likes.
Oh.
And then on another place on her account, there was a photo of her like at a park wearing a winter hat and a winter scarf and wearing like what you would expect an 11-year-old to wear. That was what I would say was a pretty innocent picture. 240 likes. And I was like, wow. And as I thought about this young girl and I looked and there was some pictures of her with her mother. And as I thought about this, I thought this girl is never going to wake up, because what we've set her up now for is to enter the acting industry and to be victimized by somebody like Harvey Weinstein.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that is the trajectory that I was imagining. And I don't think it's a far off imagination.
Right. And the coming to consciousness might need an event, that is going to jar them into the therapy room and unpacking all this stuff. Like, I mean, how long have we been sexualizing girls?
Yeah.
Right. This is like of course.
This is the most recent iteration of it.
Exactly. I saw something like Scary Mommy posted, and I saw it a couple different places about a dress that has like cutouts right along kind of down by where the hips are that shows the skin underneath. And the post was like, what do you think? Too much? And it's like in the girls section at Walmart or Target or somewhere. And it was really interesting to read the comments, but it's clearly this fashion style that women are starting to wear with the cutouts.
Not this woman.
Right.
No.
I'm like,
just to be clear.
Some women, maybe not the midlifers. But we see it. It's like normalized in fashion right now. But then to have it in the girls section, and looking at what it is that's on display. I remember in 8th grade when my daughter went to a high school football game, and she had on leggings and a kind of a short, not a short or a super crop, but like a t-shirt that didn't go past her bottom and how uncomfortable I was, and trying to have the conversation of holding both, your body, your choice, empowerment alongside their fucking creepy people. I didn't want to be sexualizing her. And yet I was sitting inside of this sexualized mindset and stumbling through this conversation with her that never really. And Rowan was like, "You're really confusing." I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's where I want to say, yeah, because it is really confusing because,
Yeah.
I always say in the classes that I teach, like any one of us should be able to walk down the street completely naked and wasted out of our minds and be safe, right? That is that should be a human right that we all have. And every one of us should also have the right to feel good and empowered in our bodies and to use those bodies in the way that we want to, as long as we're not hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
And we live in a culture that has taught us as girls and women for as long, hundreds of years, right? Thousands, maybe, that our value is in our bodies, period. End of story. And our bodies looking whatever way the culture at that time says that it should look. And that is a really fucking hard thing to balance with our kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
The safety, the idealism, the not wanting to sexualize them and yet wanting them to feel empowered. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well,
so
one thing I recommend parents say, like in your circumstance, and maybe you did say that, is like, I just want you to go into this with full consciousness. People are going to make decisions about you based on what you're wearing.
Mm-hmm.
So are you prepared to deal with those decisions that they're going to make about you? And the reason I say that is it's like, okay, someone's going to decide that you don't say that to a 6-year-old with her side cut whatsits, but with your adolescent, you can say, people are going to make decisions about you. Like your friends are going to make decisions about you that are going to be positive, but other adults, there may be folks out there that look at you and make decisions like, oh, I can see your butt, therefore, right? And just say that. And then they have agency, right? They have agency and they get to decide. And I feel like you've done I had a boy, and people made decisions about his outfits because he's fashionista. So just that, let's just think a minute critically about this. And then, you know what? If something goes on, you let me know, you won't be in trouble, right?
Yeah.
And then see what happens. And that way, it's like, I want you to be able to be in whatever you want to wear, but our culture is going to do this bullshit, right? So you just need to be aware and then go out there, be empowered in your outfit. And then we just have to cross our fingers. And then again, like this grooming, they are literally grooming those girls into being like OnlyFans. And so OnlyFans is a website where people can go and have private rooms, I guess. I'm not super well versed in this, where they can do sexual stuff on their own in private. And so they get money that way, which it's but it's a form of sex work. And sex work is fine if you're going into it with full consciousness and you understand what you're doing, but
you have a fully developed brain.
Yeah, that, right? Like this is, in my mind, again, it should be shut down and those moms should go to mommy jail. This is child sexual abuse material. And the way we know is because of the comments.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's because of the comments.
I'm glad that you brought it back to that, Amy, because when I was getting ready for this podcast episode, I was like, let's talk about, what qualifies as exploitation, child exploitation. And well, first of all, the law will vary from state to state. And there have been states where these moms have been prosecuted, but it's pretty rare because generally speaking, and the three of us happen to all live in Washington state, and I am a licensed attorney in Washington state. So that's the law that I looked up. And in Washington, it is, being a parent, legal guardian, or a person having custody or control of a minor that allows or permits the minor to engage in sexually explicit conduct, knowing that the conduct will be photographed or part of a live performance. So it has to be sexually explicit. So then the next question is, well, what does that mean? What's the definition of that? And generally again, this is unique to Washington, and I know we have listeners from all over, but in many states, and I would venture other countries as well, there will be some iteration of this, that it generally requires sexual intercourse of some kind. So genital on genital, oral genital, right? Anal genital or anal oral, right? And it can also be some other things like masturbating or physical touch, which we're not talking about here. And this is one of those, side note, super important that when parents are talking about safety, we're not talking good touch, bad touch, because it doesn't always involve touch. This is a key example. So that's like the legal definition. But then I looked up just what is the more general sort of definition of child exploitation. And this is interesting when we think about that 10-year-old Casey, who's the comedian, right?
Yeah.
Child exploitation is when someone uses a child for financial gain, sexual exploitation, labor, or personal advantage. And so actually, when it comes to whether it's a sexual pose or a comedy act, it is exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question I think we all as adults have to ask ourselves, I think maybe, is where is that line for us? What is the line of legal, illegal? And it gets very gray.
It does. Especially as someone, I mean, I've had my kids on my podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really useful for parents to hear the conversations that I'm having and how I talk to my kids. And right. So I'm sitting here listening to this and these definitions. Do I make money off it? Well, I have ads on my podcast, and that includes the ones with my kids. I'm not making a lot of money. I'd like to make more, but it's not about my kids. The kids aren't the product. The podcast and my work is the product. And so I'm sitting inside of this gray area. Am I? I don't know.
Well, your kids, you are clear about, will you come on my show?
Yes.
You have an option. This is what we're going to talk about. And like you said, Rowan, I'll pull them.
Yeah.
I'll pull
100%.
them. So I think like in terms of gray area, you are very, very, very light gray.
Okay. Thank you.
Very light gray.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that you don't do it all the time.
Right.
Your goal isn't making money. So these fucking mothers, their goal is to make money.
Off their children's bodies.
Their children's bodies. There's the goal. So one of the people, these mothers, one of them says, she makes she's got 100,000 followers. This is a huge part of her income. What am I supposed to do?
She did. I read that. I was like, take it down. Take it down now.
Take it down.
That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I don't know how they
get a job.
I don't know where they put what do they do with those pedophiles? Like, how do you justify?
How do you reconcile? Yeah.
How do you reconcile that?
That's a question Casey was asking. Like, let's sit with that.
Yeah.
What rationalization do you have to go through in your brain to say, I'm going to feed the pedophiles of the world? Which, and here's an interesting thing. There was also a guy on there who owns a clothing company that makes leotards or whatever and benefits from some of these micro influencers wearing his products. And I wrote it down. He said something like, I only wrote part of it down, it turns out, but something like I'm not going to worry about it as long as it's not hurting anybody. And I was like, well, isn't that an interesting, because it is hurting somebody.
It is.
It's hurting that child. And I want to also point out that we know that pedophiles and offenders will use this material to sexually desensitize real life children, right? Or to justify, to get themselves to the point where they're like, well, it must be okay because these moms are putting it on the internet. And so therefore my behavior is justified. And now I guarantee you somewhere, multiple places, there are real life victims that this content has fueled them being victimized.
Was it in this article where one of the creepy pedophiles actually used some content to blackmail? Wasn't that another story
Yes.
too?
Of course.
Gross.
Yes.
I'm going to sell this. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to sell this and name names. And if you don't want me to do that, then you're going to need to give me money. And then the other thing about the exploitation, it is clear exploitation, because then they make these, like, for $300, we'll sell you her leotard. For $9, I'll send you a special pack of special photos just for you. And
Yeah.
we
Like
know
nobody else is buying that.
and
Nobody.
we know
Yeah.
what they're doing. We know what they're doing with it. They're not like, what else could they be doing with it?
Right. Well, and then there was also you get a special conversation, right? Like you can get, I was like, what kind of conversations are we having
Ugh.
with these children? I keep coming back. Like, we need to use that word again and
Children.
again.
Yeah.
Children. They are children.
Children.
Frankly, not that this is okay we don't want to feed this behavior regardless of age, but we're talking about 5-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 8-year-olds, like.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think we get to use this as parents listening, right? You get to use this. You get to use this as a place to be like, whoa, curious. Did you know that do you realize this happens? To kind of dismantle what it has become super normalized in a variety of ways because of, being in the age of social media, and helping our kids develop their own critical lens, and to also, feel out like, oh yeah, there's another one of my friends posting, and oh yeah, my mom mentioned, like, pay attention to the comments, like, oh God, it is kind of weird that the only thing we're saying to each other is, oh my God, stunning, hot, beautiful. And it's like the same person posting 4 different hot, beautiful, stunning. Like the next thing, it's weird. But our kids don't know it's weird because they're swimming in the waters.
Yeah. Casey, I love that you circled us back to that space, because you're right. Like, the listeners of my podcast, your podcast, Amy's podcast, are highly unlikely.
And if you're doing that, stop it.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
if you're doing it,
don't
stop
do that anymore.
Right.
Take that shit down. And I would be willing to wager that, that would be for sure the exception rather than the rule. But I love that you brought it back to that relationship and how we can use this to sort of fuel these conversations with our kids. And then there's the whole other piece of this that we didn't really have time to dive into today. But what is the corporate responsibility and the government responsibility in all of this, right? Meta, the federal government, in monitoring and managing these things. Like, we could have whole other conversations about that. But since we can't do all it, because that is just,
oh my God, did you see the clip of Mark Zuckerberg turn around in the courtroom and just to the people whose families had been harmed by social media, and he just gave the most pathetic, like, I'm really sorry this happened to you. It's like,
hey, Mark, how would you feel if people were making comments about, does he have children? About, like, pedophiles were saying, hey, your 10-year-old looks so hot.
He does have children, by the way. He does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course he does. And he doesn't let them on social media because he knows how awful it is. Like all those people.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I agree too, like with the conversations about, hey, did you know this? And I think with younger kids, I think they need to know there are, like, bad people out there that look at children in a sexual way. Like, I think you can talk to younger children about this, but you do need to be careful about the languaging. But for kids who are 11, 12 up, just straight up, right?
Yeah.
And they should know about pedophiles. They need to know about that. 5-year-old, just maybe you don't even need to talk to them about this. Just back to this exploitation and your description of it. If you're using your child for financial gain in any way, consciously, that's exploitation in my mind.
Yep.
But one other thing too to remember is that these folks take screenshots and share them around, and they're out there forever.
Oh, they're on the dark web. They're on the dark web.
They're not going to go away. Like, you've been exploiting your child, sexually exploiting your child, making child sexual abuse material of your child. It is not going away. It is out there forever and ever. Amen. And then I do want to say, like, if you have been exploiting your child in any way, clearly I have a lot of judgy about this, but if you've been exploiting your child in any way, and this is like you're coming to consciousness here, you know what? You're in this culture too. You didn't know what you didn't know. Although seriously, like I cannot reconcile the comments from the pedophiles and I don't understand how that could possibly be okay under any circumstance. And I don't understand how Meta can let that be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't understand it either. I think there's so many pieces that have gone awry. And yes, we've been exploiting girls and women for centuries, but this has taken it to a whole new level. And we haven't even talked about what AI can do and all that.
God.
But
let's not talk
Casey,
about this. I know.
By plugging my ears.
Totally. But
Okay.
Amy, those are like, I think, important parting words. Casey, any parting words from you?
I mean, don't feel scared. Feel empowered. Like dig into this with your kids from, as neutral as you can be, as curious as you can be, because, you're going to hear from your kids. It's not that big of a deal, mom. Right. So don't let that trigger you and say, oh, yeah, tell me more. Right. Here's why it feels really weird to me. I mean, we're from the before time. Okay. We're from the before time. Our kids are in the current time. They're swimming in the waters. And just it always comes back to how can I help my kids be ever more critical in their thinking?
Yeah.
And more expanded in their thinking. And that comes with curiosity, not with like lectures and judgment.
Love it. Love it. Amy, did you have something else you wanted to add?
No, I just agree with that. Like this is an opportunity to learn. And then I would also encourage you to please share this with your peers, right? Talk with your peers. Ask them, like, did you know about this? What do you think? And then you might have to do a little educating about this. And yes, it's an opportunity. It's always an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Always an opportunity. So, all right.
Yeah, because whether we're sharing it to like educate our peers, like from the parenting standpoint, or also just to build some more awareness about these companies who really are creating our culture for better and for worse. Like, I think we all need to have more consciousness and awareness and thoughtfulness and intentionality about that. So yeah. Ladies, as always, I love being in conversation with you.
So good.
One of these days we might have to talk about something that's not
creepy.
That's not creepy.
Maybe.
But I am so grateful for your wisdom, your thoughts, and everything that you've shared today. And that you share week after week on your podcast. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Ditto.
So good.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me and Amy and Casey today. I hope you got a lot out of that interview. And I just want to highlight what Casey said a few times during the interview, which is, I didn't bring this topic to the Heartful Parent podcast because I was super concerned that you as a listener were one of the moms who is exploiting your child and sexually exploiting your child, right? I think if you are a listener of the Heartful Parent podcast, you care about safety, you care about heartful parenting, connection, respect, all of those things. And I know that's true for the listeners of both Amy's and Casey's podcasts as well. But the reason that I brought this to the podcast is because I think it is so important that we are aware of these things, that we are using our critical thinking lens. There were some gray areas brought up today, like how do we want to treat kid accounts that are based in humor, but might still be exploitative of the kiddo involved, right? And that is a harder question. Casey said she has struggled with having her kids on the podcast. That is something I am debating and have struggled with in terms of my podcast. I do think, there are some differences, some really clear differences, but it gives us all, or it leads us all into, I hope, a more thoughtful, intentional space and a place where we can bring conversations to our children once they reach a certain age. So I hope that was helpful. I hope the intention behind that conversation was really clear to everyone and that you found value in it. I love having Casey and Amy on the podcast. You can count on seeing them back at some point. But in the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in to the Heartful Parent Podcast, for being a listener, whether it's the first time or the 60th time that you are joining us. I am grateful for you. Take care, and I'll see you next week.